here. So I have a JKLM stack and I have a DEP stack, and I've been sitting here for the last half hour trying to sort to whom the question should be posed. So I'm just going to grab DEP for the start and I'll go back and forth. I know there's going to be some duplication. We tried to weed some of those out, and also many of these topics were probably dealt with during the presentation. So,
And I would suggest if you hear the question and you know who's the one with the answer, have that person address it. Because I haven't a clue.
Well, this one leads the derby here for questions, because I have three of these. I'm going to actually pose this to Mr. Cole here, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't know the answer yet. It would have been four, because I was going to ask this one. Will the money from the fine imposed on JKLM be distributed to local agencies who are involved in environmental stewardship?
I can answer that as well as anybody else. I'll begin by answering, and Jennifer, jump in at any point. This is your program, but I think the answer to that is we don't know yet. There's certainly the opportunity. Pennsylvania does have in place a community environmental projects option. If we do get to a penalty portion, that would allow the person being penalized to propose a community environmental project that could benefit the local community. At this point, that is on, that is dependent on the penalty itself and on JKLM's proposal. But I will indicate that policy is available. The likelihood, I can't speak to at this point.
Fair enough. That's four of them. We'll go to JKLM for this one. You're at liberty to disclose what happened to the employees who caused this problem using illegal ingredients in a top hole.
That's a private matter, we're not disclosing it.
Back to DEP.
I can't hear back here at all.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I can't hear at all.
That's a private matter, we're not disclosing or discussing that today.
Thank you.
We're a private company.
All right, back to DEP.
So I need to carry a mic to these people. I don't feel like Phil Donahue, but I will.
Jerry Springer. In DEP's presentation, tentatively identified compounds, TICs, are not listed as parameters detected in the water supplies, but at least one letter from DEP to a homeowner stated TICs were also detected. What are TICs, and why were they not listed in this presentation?
So TICs are,
I guess I'd ask if you're willing to stand up and then speak loudly.
so TICs, or TICs as we call them, are tentatively identified compounds. It's basically a component. We asked our lab to run these in addition to the VOC samples. They're basically a compound that was detected by the laboratory machine, but the machine was not calibrated for that compound. So they kind of run it against a library, and it's, that's why it's tentatively identified. They can't really give you a firm number on the concentration that was there. But again, us being kind of overly cautious here on what was used on the pad, we had them add the TICs just to see what would show up. We're still currently evaluating that data, and our new samples, we're also doing TICs as well. I don't know if you want to, not really much more to say about it.
Thank you.
JKLM folks, does JKLM have any information that they can share with us on any pipeline plans that are in place now, such as gathering lines, interstate lines in the Potter County area?
Pipelines, please stand. I can't.
Could you repeat it, Paul?
Information, does JKLM have any pipeline plans in place now that it could share with us, gathering lines, et cetera, in the Potter County area?
Yeah,
What did you say?
well, thank you, Ben.
I can speak any. I'll be quick because I think there's a lot of other questions more pertinent today, but we do have one pipeline under construction. We're also
2 to 3. I believe those plans, I believe, are available through the DEP publicly after they're approved. Is that correct, Jennifer?
After they're approved, yes.
So the one site is in Sweden Valley off Route 44, which we're currently constructing, and we have a couple more that we're in the process of permitting. If it's coming for permission, we're willing to sit down with the community. I don't think now is probably the time to get a whole lot of detail about it, but if you have any more questions, you can ask me after the meeting.
We'll go back to DEP. Kind of a philosophical question, I guess, or a political question, but you may have something to say about it, may not. Does this incident suggest that Pennsylvania should have standards in place for water well construction, since the well studies that have been conducted have revealed some water quality problems that are not related to this incident?
Can I take that? This is one I'm actually very happy to take. Pennsylvania is one of 2 states in the nation that do not have private well construction standards. There's been legislation introduced time and time again in the state to attempt to do that. To date, that hasn't been successful. This incident taken completely out of play, I think it is important for Pennsylvania to have those standards. There's a reason that 48 other states have done so. I think that is irrelevant to today's discussion. Absolutely, it makes total sense, and Pennsylvania has been supportive. Pennsylvania DEP has been supportive of many of those pieces of legislation as they've been introduced. So.
I might, mention also one of the things we're trying to do in evaluating the very comprehensive laboratory data that we have is we have identified other constituents such as total and fecal coliform that is in a great number of the water supplies. That is not something related to our incident, but in trying to be a good member of the community, the treatment systems that we're engineering are going to be designed to deal with not just the constituents from our release, but also treat metals that may be related to sediment influx and turbidity from the aquifer system, and also to try to ameliorate the presence of coliform bacteria in the water supplies also.
Is the company willing to discuss any plans for projected well sites or further drilling in Sweden Township, or for that matter in Potter County? That's what your plans are for future drilling.
Again, we are planning on drilling 3 to 5 wells this year. As we're currently working internally to evaluate our staff and get some people on board and acquire the right rig. There's a few ESCGP2 permits that have been approved. We're currently going through the process of getting drilling permits which are available publicly, but we do have plans to drill a couple wells in this coming year.
Do you have the permits for those? So you are receiving new permits even though this investigation is
I
ongoing?
thought we were going to stick to requesting.
If you don't want to answer, you can stay on one
This is
answer.
not a public hearing.
It's not an open meeting?
It's not a public hearing.
The open meeting is the
Marcus, can you answer that? Have they been issued new permits while this investigation is ongoing?
Melissa, I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Another DEP question. As mentioned by John McLaughlin, for many years there's been a mission, I guess you could say, to involve to include the source water protection plans into the permitting process for oil and gas. Will DEP continue to issue permits in Potter County in the meantime without those plans being taken into effect? I'm paraphrasing here. Without the source water protection areas being taken into account, will DEP continue to issue permits absent this information?
I think I can speak. I'll do my best to speak generally about that. As I mentioned following John's presentation, that's something the department is actively pursuing, including this information in our determinations. The information is available to us As far as any delay in any program, again, because that is not just focused on oil and gas, that is focused on every permit that we would evaluate. I think that, well, I know the plan at this point is to continue investigating that and including that information as soon as we can. But that doesn't mean that we'll be putting anything on hold until we get there. Again, irrelevant to, not specific to oil and gas, that's generic to all DEP issues.
I'll just keep you here because this is a good one for you.
Well, I came all of a sudden.
Kind of philosophical here as well, or public policy. Why aren't monitoring wells installed around pad sites prior to the permitting and drilling?
As I said, I'll answer as honestly as I can. I'm not sure. I don't know what more I can say about that. If oil and gas has any comments.
Yeah, I mean, there's been discussions on that. Quite honestly, the biggest issue that the department deals with when it comes to oil and gas impacts of private water supplies is straight gas migration, methane migration. We've had several of those sites where we've installed monitoring wells on the pads, either prior to or post-incident. And quite honestly, I have not seen where it's been very beneficial. But there is conversations ongoing about, installing wells maybe to detect releases from spills and those types of things. But we're still talking about it. We're not there yet. There's potential issues with installing monitoring wells on pads that could be problematic environmentally too. We just don't want to start punching a bunch of holes in the ground and potentially have conduits on well pads. That if there is a spill, could be a direct conduit to groundwater. So there's a lot to consider, but it is being discussed.
This was circulated a while ago. I'm not sure it was answered in any of the previous public gatherings, but the 22,000 gallons of water used in this process, was that water tested? Where did it come from? And did you know the constituency of it, such as whether it could carry giardia or any other contaminants?
The water came from approved sources. Some of it was sourced from the Countersport Municipal System. Some of it was sourced from our other approved source, which is a groundwater source located in Rowlett. We have a water management plant in the department. We did analytical work on the Rowlett source prior to use. We also checked it for invasive species as well. We had several divers in the source evaluating it for invasive species. So yeah, we looked at those sources. We did not test the Countersport Municipal source because it came from their system.
Penn State Extension's Dave Yoxheimer stated that it's possible that some unknown chemicals from the JKLM incident could break down and create byproducts that could linger in the aquifer undetected. Without knowing that full list of chemicals and therefore the byproducts, how can anyone know that all the risks have been abated? Not sure who wants that one.
I'll attempt to answer. We've done as Scott had mentioned earlier, we in the state have done a very, very comprehensive analysis of these products. And I think, Scott, it was you that said we probably know more about what's in that product than the manufacturers do at this point from a chemical composition standpoint. We do know that isopropanol breaks down into acetone, so we are looking for that biodegradation product. The other constituents that are present aren't believed to break down into anything further, such as the benzenes, the toluenes, the ethyl-benzenes, the xylene compounds. So up to this point in time, based on everything that we know, based on my chemistry background, based on the laboratory's chemistry background, based on some of the other experts that we have in the field, we're not aware of any other constituents that would be problematic.
The reason that we had this very experienced multidisciplinary team, which, by the way, did include a toxicologist, was to look in a very, very thorough and comprehensive manner at the materials that were used, to understand the chemical nature and ingredients, and of course, look at potential degradation products. So the acetone was something that our toxicologist identified very early on in the investigation as a breakdown product of the isopropanol. So that was on our list from the, right out of the blocks. So, the purpose of having chemists and hydrogeologists and environmental scientists and so forth on a team was, we knew this would be a complex undertaking, and our objective was to fully deploy a very, very experienced team of scientists and engineers to make sure that, we were not leaving any stones unturned, and that there was something working in the groundwater flow system that could be an impact to people that we didn't know about because we didn't know to look for.
Isn't putting a chemical solution down a hole if you don't know the full composition of that solution kind of leaving a big rock unturned?
Restate your question, please.
You're just now finding out the total, well, up to as much as you can know, the total chemical composition of the solution used on the hole. And you say, you keep using this phrase, leaving no stone unturned, but isn't putting a solution down a hole when you don't know the full chemical composition, leaving a huge stone unturned right from the get-go?
Well, the purpose of the investigation is to determine that. We were not aware that the material was going to be used in the first place from a company standpoint. And the investigation was clearly earmarked to make sure that once it had gone down the hole, that we had thoroughly characterized the material and all of its components, and that we also completely understood the groundwater flow system. As Penny and R indicated, this is a very complicated hydrogeologic environment, and the groundwater is flowing through fractured rock. And in order to understand the pathway that the material is traveling, the rate in which it's traveling, to identify, hopefully in advance, the potential receptors, we've gone out and done this very, very detailed hydrogeologic investigation, really to map the pathway that the materials are traveling in and protect the community.
This is a very unique instrument. It's your future operations, you will know the full chemical composition of everything.
We can only, our objective is to very thoroughly screen materials that are brought on site before they're brought on site in the future, to try to work with the vendors to make sure that they're as environmentally safe as possible. And we're changing some of our procedures. The question about monitoring wells, we've made a company decision that we're going to drill a monitoring well before we even construct a well pad. Our first well pad had 3 monitoring wells on it. We now have about 9 monitoring wells in the system. And as a company policy, we're going to install a monitoring well before a well pad is installed to make decisions about whether or not we think we're penetrating a vulnerable hydrogeologic environment. And in some cases, if we encounter the same kinds of conditions that we encounter on the 118 well pad, we'll probably elect not to construct a well pad and even drill a gas well there.
And I have a question about trade secret, unless you're going to hit it all.
Well, you can hit that. We have 2 more minutes, and I need to make an announcement how we're going to handle the 40 questions we haven't gotten to yet, so it'll be very quick. Or we'll just proceed. We'll just proceed. We have promised all our speakers that at noon, this meeting would conclude. What has obviously happened, there's a lot more questions that are...
Because it's a violation of the Sunshine Act, that we provided any time for people to get
All
on.
right, anyhow, you can say that in a minute, Josh, but I'm going to make a statement here first of all,
What it is.
which is what I'm going to try to... I'm not going to shout, I'll just...
Okay.
At any rate, as I was saying before the interruption was, we are going to establish a site on our Natural Gas Resource Center website through which people can pose questions. We'll try to get these questions brought into that process as well. We'll present the questions to DEP, JKLM, or anyone else who might be able to answer them, and try to get some responses to the questions that have already been posed on the naturalgasresourcecenter.com website. You can access that by just going to PotterCountyPA.net. There are a lot of good questions here that didn't make the cut. It became very obvious we weren't going to be able to ask them all within our time period here, so we do want to try to get answers to them.
I believe at this time we simply will open the floor as directed. We'll suggestion. If in fact you had questions you took the time to write down, as Paul indicated, we intend everything to get answered that we can answer. I also indicated that we were going to have an open forum in which those who want to ask direct questions will have that opportunity. If you had a question you didn't get answered and you want to ask it directly, feel free to do so. And we'll open the floor up, and those who want to ask the questions can continue to do so. All I can suggest at this point is, we put on a program earlier. If there's anything specific to what we had to say, we certainly would like to answer those questions also, but I sense the questions to be answered and to ask are not going to be directed at the Gas Resource Center and those presenters today. So at this point, I guess what I'll do is simply open the floor. I'll try to manage the flow of questions, and to those who will be asking, all I ask is that you make them one question, not the continuation you see in the press where they go. And my second question is, and have some kind of a conclusionary to the question, even though there never may be an answer specific, at least at some point say, okay, that's good for today. I think these folks will all be available, and we can move forward from there, and I'll start right there.
The fluid that was used, when in general, is listed as
You
a...
can stand up, sir.
The fluid that was used in general is listed as a fracking fluid under frac focus. It's considered a corrosion inhibitor. This surfactant that was used, okay? I understand that it's a trade secret, has exemptions under the federal law when it is used during fracking. In this particular case, and I mean hydraulic fracture. In this particular case, it was not used.
Please turn off all cell phones.
It was not used during hydraulic fracturing. So it could then be that you would have to release the composition of this chemical. The rest of the 80% that you're saying is trade secret, because it's not within that exemption. So my question is, what is the rest of the chemical? If it's vegetable oil, tell the public it's vegetable oil. If it's BTEX compounds, tell them it's BTEX. But let's find out what that is, because you have not used it legally, you have not used it as the way it's been supposed to be used to provide it its exemption, you've used it during drilling. So what is the rest of the
We
chemical?
don't use F485 for hydraulic fracture wells, right, Roger?
That's the way it's listed on the website under DEP's guidelines, so it's fracturing.
Okay, let me make a statement on behalf of JKLM. I'm John Sansky, I'm the general counsel for the company. We were invited to come to this presentation. We spent a lot of time, a lot of resources. You saw the detailed nature of the PowerPoint presentations. We think we've answered the questions. We think we've addressed the concerns. You heard Ms. Means say that we've been cooperative in the investigation. So we're not going to sit here all day and play game of gotcha and answer leading questions and go back and forth all day. We think we've answered that question. I'm sorry if Mr. Urbanek doesn't understand what the answer is in the guise of presentation, but we think it's been answered.
Does anyone else,
I'm sorry,
raise your
Mr.
hand if
If
you would
anything
like
else,
to know
we'll
the
be here
full
for a
chemical
reasonable
composition
period.
of
We have-
what went down that hole?
We have a
Raise your hand if
we
you would
also
like
have
to
community
know the full
offices that
chemical
open weekly.
composition,
Feel
and
free
you
to
do
stop
not
by and
know.
ask
Excuse me,
questions as well.
just a second, guys. I understand,
He feels like he's done a good job, there are still questions in the
and
audience.
there probably will be when we're all done, no matter how
Are
long.
you going to disclose the
Is
full
this how
chemical
this is gonna go
composition of
down
what
the
went
list?
down that
We
hole?
told you what we know about the chemical analysis. It's not concerning. End of story. Next question.
So we need to file a lawsuit against the company that provided the chemical, is that right?
You need to do whatever you think you need to do, sir.
That sounds like it's.
That's the answer.
Please, let me ask it.
And let me say one other thing too. You know, we have plans for this, in this community, with this community. We have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this community. And we-
But still not given the full list of chemicals you're using.
Okay, if you interrupt me one more time.
Oh, you do?
Well, at this point, let me own
Not
this.
civil discourse. You're trying to
Sir,
cross-examine me.
Scott, can you help me here?
I'm not an attorney.
I would like to just own this meeting for a minute.
Well, it is your meeting.
Yeah, I thought so. where we've just gotten to is where I feared we'd end up, and I'm not surprised. And I feel bad about it because I was about ready to say, you know, I'm kind of proud of Potter County, because one thing we can do here is have a meeting. And we can respect each other, and we can do things that are difficult outside of this room. Now, that may sound just a little bit warm and fuzzy, but you know, I kind of feel that way, so I'm going to say it. I know these answers are not going to come to the satisfaction of those who want to ask them, and I can appreciate it, and I'm not going to diminish your ability to do whatever you would like to do to get your answer. What I can do is say this is a meeting that's being held by Potter County Natural Gas Resource Center. We invited everybody here today. You can context it any way you want as a public meeting and go at it any way you'd like. All I'm going to say to everybody that's here, if you have an interest in continuing, please stay. This will go on to whatever degree everybody can tolerate it. If it reaches a point where it's like, I guess this has reached that nowhere to go from here point, I would not be surprised if you decided it was time to go do lunch. And I don't mean it to diminish anybody's opportunity. I just need, on behalf of the commissioners, to say, I don't know what else to offer. So at this point, I guess what's going to be is going to be, folks, endure. And thanks for coming, really, everybody else. Thank you very much for that. We tried to bring a group in here that can answer